Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today on Collection Lessons, I want to talk about financing gets you stuck. This is part of my collection lesson series. Anything I say on this channel is not anything advice, and let's get going. So I'm going to talk about debt, and I talk about financing and all that stuff a lot. And I've been doing these collection lessons for over a year now. I, I should have made a video about an anniversary or something, but I didn't. But I talk about debt a lot, and I talk about financing and 0%, and this percent and that percent, and I talk about them because I feel like that's the main problem that most people have in life is with money and debt specifically that they chase when they steal their future to buy the present kind of thing, right? And so in this video, I want to talk about financing gets you stuck with some more examples, because there's more to debt and there's more to money than just numbers, right? There's like your emotionalness, your emotional well-being, your mindset, your life, your opportunity cost, all that stuff, right? So let's go into an example. When you, or like, and this is what I've experienced too in the last 10 years, when you go into financing, whether that usually, like, let's start with a car. When you finance a car for $300 a month, right? And you do that for like 5 to 7 years, all of a sudden this becomes a line item in your budget, if you even run a budget. You know, it'll become a line item regardless if you run a budget or not. But it'll become like, oh, my rent is 1,500, my power is probably 100, my car payment's 300. My gas is probably $100 a month. My Netflix is probably $50 by now per month and all that stuff, right? And you don't even realize that you just entered a line item that doesn't need to exist, right? And rent is either it exists as a rent or it exists as a could be existing as a mortgage payment, or if it's not even one of those, like you actually own the house, then it exists as in the fixes, like the upkeep, the total cost of ownership, right? That's a guaranteed thing, let alone if it's on top of a mortgage, or you just pay this because you don't pay any of these are the ownership parts of the house, right? um so you own the responsibilities of that, but it'll become a line item. It'll become the same as like your power bill. You'll be like, oh, my power bill is pretty much guaranteed to happen every month. Oh, my financing for my car of 300 is I signed up for 5 to 7 years. It's guaranteed to happen for the next 5 to 7 years. The problem with that is it becomes a line item. When something becomes a line item, it becomes expected the next month, and then next month, and then the next year, and then the next 5 years, next 10 years. And all of a sudden, when this ends, right, when your term is up for 5 to 7 years, and that seventh year ends, and you have no more 300. Here's the thing: 50% of the time, 50% of the time, you will continue the same pattern that just happened. So that means you will outright go out and start a new car payment. And that's when you get stuck in this cycle of debt of you start, oh, well, I used to be able to afford a 300, vehicle financing. Maybe now I can, afford a 400 or maybe just another 300 because you already expected it. It's already accounted for. You put it as a line item. You already written off that money every month. Why not just do it for another 5 to 7 years, right? Like, and that's 50% of the people do that. Now, chances are, you're on either side of this. Either you realize how much it just ate the cost out of you, or the other statistic you got to beat is 90% will continue the pattern in another form of debt because they already allocated this debt. What does that mean? Well, that means like, 50% just continue on. That means 50% of these, that means that there's 40% left. It's hard to explain percents here, but basically, it's 50% chance you're going to continue what you're doing. There's a 90% chance you're either going to continue what we're doing, which is the above, or you're going to put that into some sort of other debt, meaning like, well, now that you got 300 left over, you create more line items and you can say, well, I can afford Amazon Prime for $50 a month or whatever it is, and then I can afford, you know, maybe a piece of pizza every week, which is another $100. You know, like then you break apart this 300 and it becomes like four different line items here, and that's 90% of the time is you just reallocated that debt payment to another form of debt or things you don't need. The only other 10% are people that actually like figure out, hey, that wasn't the greatest idea. Let me just save or invest. Save or invest that money. That's the other 10%. So if you did this for, you know, if you did this once, 90% of the time you're either going to put, you know, more into debt, or you're going to buy another vehicle that's doing the exact same thing, or you keep it going, right? And then after that, then you get stuck. And what does this stick you for? Well, not only are you signing up for 5 to 7 years, you're also signing up your current situation for 5 to 7 years. What does that mean? Well, it means that your job that you had when you started this, you're going to have a job after, you know, during this 5 to 7 year period, because you probably haven't allocated and you're not financially, we'll call it literate enough to do this after you're retired, right? So you probably do this while you're, you know, working towards retirement, which then slows down your retirement. So it's not a great thing. This is the same thing with a $1,500 mortgage. The only difference with the $1,500 a month mortgage is it's not for 5 to 7 years usually. It might be for 20 to 30 years. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you probably do the same thing over here, becomes a line item, blah, 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 on top of all that. But it means the situation that you got yourself into this, the JOB here, is going to be the job that you're either going to have to maintain the same salary or hopefully better over the course of 20 to 30 years. You just, by, you know, taking the mortgage and being like, okay, I signed a mortgage for 25 years, you just signed up to having a job for 25 years. And people don't understand the difference. It gets you stuck. You know, this is the thing that I've realized after having a house and having, you know, jobs, is basically I was going to be glued to a job for that amount of time. The benefit of what I'm doing now, where I'm renting and creating, you know, what people pay in mortgage, I'm actually saving in investments and investing. I'm creating more equity with my investments than most people are putting equity into their house. And that gives me the freedom to be able to move at any moment in life, as well as I don't have all this capital stuck. I don't have, you know, all of this debt payments that I have to do. It doesn't get me stuck, right? So, like, you know, let's say you have a, I don't know, $500,000 house. Let's say you have 200K equity or whatever that is, and there's 300K of debt. Well, you know that the debt that's here, we'll call it with the D, you know that's not going to be 300K by the time you paid off. It's probably going to be worth like 400 or 500, you know, K of debt. I would say more like 400. Just quick math. You know, like you're going to be paying for this debt. It's actually going to cost you 400, even though it says 300 on the paper, right? But in total, you'll have 500K stuck in the house that doesn't make you any money. When something doesn't make you money and takes money from you, it's called a liability, right? But if you have 500K in investments that are actually like growing, that are giving you dividends, you see how you're not as stuck. So you can afford $1,500 rent when you have 500K in the bank, giving you 1,500 in monthly dividends, right? So you're not as stuck. So you could quit your job and your rent is paid for. You can't really quit your job until this is either paid for, and then hopefully what are you going to do with all the total cost of ownership stuff on top of all that, right? So it gets you stuck. And that's just like, that's what I wanted to share is financing just keeps you where you are. You just signed yourself up. It's like if you start a job and then you also sign a contract for a house for 25 years, you not only sign the contract for 25 years for the house, you sign the job for 25 years. And then you're like, you might, if you're like, I don't know, 30 or 20 or 20, 30, 40 right now, and then 25 years, and then you also renew the mortgage. Then what? Right? You just renewed your job. Hopefully it's still there and not, you know, non-existent in the future, with jobs getting cut, with businesses, you know, doing cuts, that type of thing. So I wanted to share that financing gets you stuck. You don't want to be stuck. You want to be taking advantage of things when you can. you know, the last one I'll go into is a phone. So a lot of people finance their phone. They don't even know they finance their phone, but they finance a phone and then they don't have access to like cheap plans here in Canada anyway. So it's like when people's phone bills are $80, let's say a month, and they're financing their phone, and then all of a sudden their phone bill goes to 60. They're like, oh, what happened? And they're like, oh, I can get a new phone, right? But it's like if you just, and then you know people will go get a new phone because they think they have to, whatever. But it's like it keeps you in that financing state, and then you're financing for like all these line items become financing, and then all of a sudden you'll have 50% of your line items here of monthly stuff coming out is all because of debt. It's all because of your choices. You don't want that. You know, when your phone bill goes from 80 to 60, you look at it and be like, oh, my phone is actually paid off. Let's change that. You know, I own my phone. Let's go to a cheaper plan. My plan right now is a $15 plan. And that's basically what I pay, plus taxes, whatever. And then I run it through, you know, a business because that's what I do on the side. And it's like, instead of this being a personal expense, this is a business expense and a write-off, and now it's not a line item in my line items anymore, right? And I changed that over the last 5 years. I went from this to this, and owning the things that I own, and not getting stuck in the financing, and canceling all my subscriptions and all that stuff. And I got debt free, 133 to 135K in the last 3 years are gone of debt, and I'm continuing it. It's not like I got debt free and all of a sudden I'm piling everything back on. It's like, no, no, no. I want 130K, you know, every 3 years. If I could pay off 130K of debt in 3 years, I can gain 130K of investments in 3 years, technically, right? And then those compound, right? And then those compound on each other. And all of a sudden it's like, you know, now I'm debt free. I've 50, 60K in the bank, and it's growing money and it's making money every month, every day. And that's where you want to be, right? Whereas if I got stuck financing, I would have been stuck at my house for another 20 years and I wouldn't have had this extra cash. I wouldn't have been able to get ahead. And it just gets you stuck. That's what I'm trying to say. Hope that makes sense. Hope you guys doing well. Thanks, and talk soon.